Today, I'm going to share a story so intense it will make you question where loyalty truly lies. Set in the unforgiving Wild West, where wind howls through canyons and every shadow hides a threat. This is a land shaped by gold, guns, and broken promises, where one truth stands between peace and massacre. It all starts with a forgotten ledger, an ordinary object that ignites a chain of events no one can stop. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It did not begin with gunfire. It did not begin with screams or a horse collapsing in the dirt. It began with silence. Dust lay thick in the storage room, drifting slowly through a narrow beam of lantern light. It settled over an old cedar trunk the way earth settles over a grave. Quiet, final, patient. Since the day Samuel Whitaker and Ellen Whitaker were lowered into Wyoming soil, the ranch had felt different, as if the land itself were holding its breath. The afternoon outside was still, unnaturally so. Heat pressed against the windows, heavy and unmoving. Grief has a way of changing how a house lives. After her parents' deaths, the corners of the rooms seemed colder, the walls less forgiving. Something vital had been carved out of the place and never returned. May Whitaker stood alone in the storage room, lantern in one hand, a dull, restless ache lodged deep in her chest. Her gaze fixed on the trunk. She hadn't planned to open it. She hadn't even meant to touch it. The trunk had always belonged to her father. The town remembered Samuel Whitaker as a hard man. Fair, unbending, the kind who worked sun-up to sundown and spoke only when words mattered. He carried his sorrow quietly, buried beneath muscle and duty. Now he was gone, and the silence he left behind roared louder than any argument May had with herself. Something pulled her forward, a pressure she couldn't name. She knelt. The hinges protested as she lifted the lid. The smell inside was old wool, iron, and memory. A folded blanket lay on top, beside a rusted branding iron that had marked the herd for decades. Beneath them sat something smaller, a ledger, worn, leather cracked and dry, its spine nearly split. It looked fragile, forgotten. May should have closed the trunk. She should have let the past stay buried. She didn't. The first pages were harmless. Ordinary records, horse sales, feed prices creeping higher each season, taxes paid on the Whitaker brand. The handwriting was steady, measured, her father's hand. Careful, honest. But as she turned the pages, the ink changed. The script grew tighter, angrier. The pen pressed so hard it scored the paper, carving words instead of writing them. May felt her scalp tighten. She knew this handwriting. These pages were not her father's. They belonged to her older brother, Cole Whitaker. Her eyes followed rough sketches etched into the margins. A narrow canyon, its ridgeline drawn with unsettling precision. Next to it, frantic notes in Cole's sharp, slanted hand. May read the words, and her breath caught. Gold vein thick as a man's wrist. Luther Crow to supply rifles. Then the line that made the floor seem to tilt beneath her feet. Red Mesa territory must be cleared. Cleared. The word hung in the air like a sentence being passed. May turned the page, hands shaking. Dates followed, ammunition counts, a crude, merciless plan for a night assault. It was a blueprint for erasing the Red Mesa people, a settlement that had lived in that canyon long before the Whitakers ever claimed this land. May closed her eyes, nausea rising hard and fast. She had grown up here. She knew the Red Mesa people were not vermin to be crushed. No one on the frontier was. Over the years, she had traded herbs with them near the posts, exchanged soap, once even shared a ribbon with a shy Red Mesa girl who barely spoke above a whisper. They were not monsters. Yet there it was, written in black ink, proof that her own brother was planning their destruction. Still, the ledger was not finished with her. May forced herself to continue. The next page nearly slipped from her fingers. A note, raw, furious, the ink heavy as if soaked in rage. They killed our parents. I'll make them pay. Her hands trembled violently. Cole had told this story for years. Late nights, whiskey sharp on his breath, grief twisted into something bitter and sharp. He had told the town. He had told her. He had told himself that the Red Mesa people murdered Samuel and Ellen Whitaker. But staring at the maps, the payments, Luther Crow's name etched across the pages, the past rearranged itself with brutal clarity. She remembered the day her parents were found near the old mine. No Red Mesa weapons, no pony tracks, only whispers, claim jumpers, smugglers, land disputes gone wrong. Cole had never listened. Cole needed an enemy. His grief was too heavy to carry alone, so he shaped it into a lie, one that justified greed, blood, and stolen land. May stood in the storage room, the ledger burning in her hands. The ranch was no longer empty. It was crowded with truth, thick and suffocating. And then, the back door slammed. Bootsteps crossed the kitchen floor, heavy, impatient, familiar. May froze. Cole Whitaker was home. And she was holding the one thing that could destroy him. He had repeated it in a voice stripped of warmth, sharpened by long nights and cheap whiskey, each word honed into a blade. He told the frontier settlers. He told May Whitaker. And most of all, he told himself that the Red Mesa people were the ones who murdered their parents. But as May stared at the plans, at the sketched veins of gold, and the rifle orders tied to Luther Crow, the past shifted inside her like loose ground giving way. She had always felt a wrongness in Cole Whitaker's story, a hollow note that never rang true. She remembered the day Samuel and Ellen Whitaker were found near the old mine shaft. There had been no Red Mesa weapons, no bear hoof tracks in the dust, no signs of a raid. Back then, the sheriff had murmured about claim jumpers, smugglers, a land dispute that turned ugly in the wrong place at the wrong time. But Cole had never listened. He needed an enemy. His grief was too massive, too jagged to shoulder alone. So he shaped it, gave it a face. He twisted their parents' deaths into a lie convenient enough to carry him forward, a lie that excused stealing land heavy with gold, land the Red Mesa people had called home, long before the Whitakers ever laid claim to it. He wasn't honoring their memory. He was burning it for profit. May stood frozen in the dim storage room, the ledger hot in her hands. The ranch was no longer silent. It was crowded, with truth, with the weight of everything she had just learned. The brother she thought she knew, the man meant to lead their family, was building a war on a foundation of lies. And then, the back door slammed. Heavy boots crossed the kitchen floor, impatient and familiar. A rhythm May knew by heart. Cole was home. And she was standing there, holding the one thing that could ruin him. The door didn't creak open. It crashed, like a judge's gavel striking wood. May stiffened, her heart pounding like a trapped bird. She knew that walk, the arrogant, forceful stride of a man who believed the world owed him something. Cole Whitaker filled the doorway. Late afternoon light clung to the dust on his coat. Even from across the room, she caught his scent. Stale trail dirt, horsehair, and the sharp, sweet bite of whiskey. Under it all was something else, harder to name. Impossible to miss entitlement. His eyes, usually a pale, drifting blue, tightened the moment they locked on the ledger in her hands. "What the hell are you doing?" His voice was low, coiled tight like a rattler ready to strike. "That trunk ain't yours." May swallowed. Fear clawed at her throat. She was terrified. But the truth inside her held her upright like iron in her spine. She looked at the brother she had cooked for, stitched clothes for, grieved beside. "Why?" she asked, her voice shaking but steady. "Why the rifles? Why Luther Crow? Why go after the Red Mesa people?" Cole's jaw flexed. For a long, suffocating moment, he said nothing. Then he stepped closer. With each stride, the room seemed to contract, the air thinning. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said, not with regret but accusation. "Put it down." "No," May pressed, clutching the ledger to her chest like a shield. "Answer me." "They're the reason Ma and Pa are dead," he snapped. The words flew out like gunfire. "You think I'm just going to sit back while those savages keep what's ours?" He gestured wildly, his control cracking. "That gold should have fed this ranch for generations." May stared at him, really saw him for the first time in years. "Gold," she whispered. "You're talking about murder." "Cole, you're talking about wiping out families," May said. "Women, children, all for a strip of gold buried in a canyon." Cole's eyes ignited, bright and fevered, and there it was, the rot she had always feared, finally exposed. "You still don't understand," he hissed. He stepped into her space, his shadow swallowing her whole. "Everything we lost, our land, our parents, our future, it all comes back to them." He leaned closer. "If you'd stop being so damn soft, you'd see it too." "No," May whispered. She lifted the ledger, her hand shaking. "I see something else. I see the truth. I see that you and Luther Crow are the monsters." Her voice steadied. "This is wrong, Cole. It's evil." Cole's face went hard as stone. "Luther warned me," he muttered. "Said you were a weak link." Before May could move, before she could even breathe, he lunged. The ledger struck the floor with a dull crack. May's arm slammed into the wall as she tried to twist free, but she was no match for him. In one sharp, brutal motion, Cole seized her wrists. His grip was merciless, iron tight, bruising her skin instantly. "You want the truth?" he growled, inches from her face, whiskey burning on his breath. "Fine. The truth is, you know too much." Terror sliced through her, cold and clean, but May refused to cry. She would not give him that. "Cole," she said, her voice breaking, "don't do this. We're family." Family meant nothing to him now, not with gold on the scales. His decision had already been made. He dragged her from the house, her boots scraping uselessly across the boards. Outside, the late afternoon heat pressed down as the sun stretched long, warped shadows across the yard. He threw her over his horse like a sack of feed, ignored her pleas, and swung into the saddle behind her. He rode hard, not toward town, not toward neighbors. He turned for the Badlands, the stretch locals called the Devil's Anvil. The world blurred past May's eyes, sand, sagebrush, distant ridges melting into heat haze. The farther they went, the harsher the land became. Rolling pasture gave way to jagged stone and starving sand, a place where nothing survived without a fight, a land of silence and bones. Cole finally stopped beside a sun-blasted cottonwood, standing alone in miles of emptiness. Its branches were twisted and dry, clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers begging for rain. He hauled May down. She stumbled, legs weak with fear. He did not steady her. Instead, he pulled a rope from his saddlebag, the same rough hemp he used on stubborn cattle, and shoved her against the trunk. The bark bit into her back as he wrapped the rope around her, binding her tight to dead wood. The fibers burned her skin, sawing her wrists raw. "Cole, please," she gasped, the reality finally breaking through her voice. "You can't leave me here." He cinched the knot, jerking it tight with cruel precision. Then he stepped back, inspecting his work. He looked at her not as a sister, but as a problem solved. "Maybe the sun'll teach you something," he said, his voice empty of warmth. He mounted up and looked down at her from the saddle. "Teach me what?" May cried, tears finally spilling as the wind tore at her hair. "Loyalty," he said. "Blood, choosing the right side." May glared at him. "Family doesn't do this." For a heartbeat, just a sliver of time, Cole's eyes flickered. Doubt, regret, then it was gone. Then the hesitation vanished. The mask dropped back into place, hard and unyielding. His eyes turned cold again. "You'll thank me in the afterlife," Cole Whitaker muttered. He kicked his heels into the horse and wheeled it around, sending it back toward the ranch, back toward his lies, his gold, and everything he had chosen over blood. He rode off without looking back. May Whitaker watched him fade into the red burn of the setting sun. Her breath shuddered in her chest. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against the ropes. The desert swallowed the space he left behind, rushing in with vast, uncaring silence. She was alone, bound to a dead tree in the middle of the devil's anvil. As the sun slipped below the horizon, the sky bruised purple and red. May understood something with chilling clarity. The darkness wasn't just coming for the land. It was coming for her. Night in the desert tests a person without mercy. It steals warmth from your body and hope from your soul, leaving nothing but the distant, indifferent stare of the stars. May had never known sand could turn so cold after sundown. It wasn't a simple chill. It was a deep, aching freeze that sank into her bones. By the time the moon crested the jagged ridge, washing the devil's anvil in silver and blue, her lips were split and bleeding. Her wrists burned raw where the hemp rope had chewed into her skin. She had fought the bindings for the first hour, twisting and straining until her arms went numb. But the knots Cole tied were meant for wild horses, tight, patient, unforgiving. Time stretched. Hours crawled past like years. The wind rose and fell, sounding like the slow breath of some ancient thing sleeping beneath the earth. Somewhere far off, a coyote cried. A lonely, echoing sound that tightened her spine. Thirst followed, not as dryness, but as pain, sharp and physical, like broken glass in her throat. As her thoughts began to drift, brushing the edge of unconsciousness, May made a quiet vow to the darkness. She might die out here. She might become nothing more than bleached bones beneath a cottonwood. But she would not die carrying a lie. Not her brother's lie. Not any lie. If this was the end, she would meet it with the truth of that ledger burned into her heart. She was barely awake when a sound grazed the night. Hoofbeats. May stiffened, fear spiking through her exhaustion. She knew the sound of Cole's gelding, hard, angry, punishing, just like the man who rode it. But these hooves were different. Measured, soft, careful. They didn't strike the earth. They moved with it. May held her breath. From the darkness, a rider stepped into the moonlight. He wore a buckskin shirt. His horse moved with the quiet certainty of a creature born to this harsh land. Moonlight traced the sharp line of his cheekbones and caught the dark shine of braids falling past his shoulders. Before he spoke, May knew. Red Mesa people. For a long moment he didn't move. He simply studied her, eyes dark as cooled obsidian. There was no hatred there, no triumph, only a deep, steady attention, as if he were weighing the soul of the woman bound to the tree. When he dismounted, he moved like water, fluid, silent, deliberate. He crouched near her. Smoke and juniper clung to his clothes, a scent that carried canyon winds and hidden springs. "You shouldn't be alive," he said quietly. His voice was calm, grounded, shaped by someone who learned English by listening to the land, not from books. "The desert doesn't spare many." May tried to answer, but her throat gave only a dry rasp. The man reached into a pouch at his belt and drew out a small goatskin flask. He didn't hand it to her. Instead, he lifted her chin with surprising, calloused gentleness and brought the flask to her lips. "Slow," he murmured. "If you drink too fast, you'll get sick." The first drop of water touched her tongue like mercy. Cool, clean, sweet beyond anything she had ever known. It was the best thing May Whitaker had ever tasted. She gasped, reaching for more, but he steadied the flask, controlling the flow. He waited until she nodded, until her eyes told him she was ready, before giving her a second sip, then a third. "That's better," he said, setting the flask aside. His focus shifted to her wrists. He examined the rope, his brows drawing tight. There was anger there, yes, but not directed at her. It was disbelief. "Your own people did this?" he asked. May's voice finally came back to her, cracked and fragile. "Yes. Caesar?" She swallowed hard, forcing the words out as she met his gaze. "Because I know the truth." That answer mattered to him. She could see it. He didn't ask what truth. He didn't demand proof. Instead, he reached down and pulled a knife from his boot. The handle was bone, polished smooth by years of use. With one clean motion, he sliced through the rope. The tension vanished. May sagged as her legs gave way. But she didn't fall. He caught her under the arms, holding her weight with effortless strength. For a moment she rested against him, too weak to stand, too overwhelmed to pull back. He was a stranger, an enemy, according to her brother. Yet his grip was the only thing keeping her upright. "You can't stay here," he said. "Not another hour." May blinked up at him, her vision swimming. Who are you?" "Red Hawk," he answered simply. She knew the name. Everyone within 100 miles did. The youngest man ever chosen to lead the Red Mesa people. A leader said to read the land the way others read scripture. He guided her toward his horse, lifting her carefully. But just as his hands closed around her waist, the quiet shattered. A branch snapped in the dark. Red Hawk froze. His hand slid instantly toward the knife at his hip. Then came the sharp, metallic click of a rifle being cocked somewhere in the shadows. A familiar voice drifted out, sharp with triumph, soaked in poison. "There you are, May." 4 men stepped into the moonlight, rifles raised, lanterns swinging wildly and throwing ghost-like light across their faces. Cole Whitaker stood among them. Beside him were men May recognized at once, Luther Crow's gunmen. Cole hadn't just left her to die. He had come back to make sure the job was finished. He moved fully into the light, his eyes burning with something feral, part rage, part desperation. "Get your hands off my sister," he snarled. "You, Apache bastard!" Red Hawk didn't react to the insult. He didn't move at all, except to shift his stance, placing himself squarely between May and the rifles aimed their way. He became a shield. May's heart slammed against her ribs. "Cole, stop, please, it's over." "Over?" Cole barked a laugh that sounded like dry leaves snapping. "You think riding off with one of them makes anything over? You're coming home, May. We're gonna fix your head." "No," May said, steady, surprising herself. "I'm not!" Cole's face twisted. "They've turned you already, poisoned your mind. I knew it." He raised his rifle, not at May, but at Red Hawk's chest. "Move," Cole shouted. "Move, savage, or I'll make you." Red Hawk didn't flinch. "She needs water. Medicine," he said calmly. "If you take her back now, she'll die." "Not my concern," Cole spat. The moment stretched. Thin, silent, unbearable. As if the whole world had stopped breathing. May saw Cole Whitaker's finger curl tight on the trigger. "No!" she screamed. Red Hawk moved before the thought could finish forming. He shoved May sideways, hard, throwing her behind the solid bulk of the horse, and stepped fully into the line of fire himself. The rifle thundered. A burst of flame ripped through the darkness, lighting the night like a lightning strike. May heard the sickening impact, flesh tearing, fabric ripping. Red Hawk staggered as the bullet grazed his shoulder, blood darkening his buckskin. But he didn't fall. The night exploded into chaos. Red Hawk seized the reins with one hand and vaulted into the saddle in a single fluid motion, ignoring the blood spreading across his shirt. He reached down and hauled May up behind him with raw, desperate strength. "Hold on," he commanded. He drove his heels into the horse. Hooves tore into the sand, spraying rock and dust. Another shot cracked the air as they bolted away from the cottonwood, weaving through brush and scattered boulders. May heard Cole shouting, barking orders for his men to follow. But Red Hawk chose a path only someone born of that land could see. He plunged the horse into a narrow wash between leaning canyon walls, dropping them into a twisting, lightless maze of stone. Behind them, the shouts unraveled, swallowed by darkness and confusion. Ahead lay the deep, dangerous heart of Red Mesa people country. May pressed her face into Red Hawk's back, feeling the heat of his body and the fierce, steady rhythm of his heart driving them forward. She was leaving her old life behind, riding into the unknown with a man she had been taught to fear. For the first time in her life, she felt completely, terrifyingly awake. Dawn crept across the desert like a slow-burning fire, washing the canyon paths in bruised purple and copper. May drifted in and out of consciousness through the long, brutal night, her weight resting against Red Hawk's unwavering frame as his horse carried them deeper into land no map her father had ever dared to mark. When awareness finally returned, it didn't rush in. It came like a slow, aching tide. The first thing she noticed was the scent. She expected blood, dust, the metallic sting of pain. Instead, the air was sweet, sage smoke, roasted pine nuts, and the cool, damp breath of running water. May opened her eyes. She was no longer in the desert. Below them, cradled between stone bluffs carved by centuries of wind, lay the stronghold of the Red Mesa people. She had grown up hearing stories about places like this, stories told by men like her brother, who spoke of chaos and savagery. But what she saw was order. Hide lodges stood in a grounded circle, solid and deliberate. Smoke drifted from morning fires in thin blue ribbons. Horses grazed along a creek that wound through the valley like a silver thread. Children ran laughing through tall grass. Women worked stone and grain with calm, synchronized movements. It was a home. It carried a quiet strength, a belonging woven into earth and sky that May had never felt on the ranch, not once in all her years. Then the moment shattered. A sharp shout cut through the morning. Half a dozen warriors surged from between the lodges, bows drawn, braids snapping in the wind. The air went brittle. Their eyes locked first on Red Hawk, their leader, then shifted to the white woman slumped behind him. The welcome died instantly. A tall warrior stepped forward, broad-chested, his face marked with red ochre. He held an ashwood bow, and his stare was sharp enough to slice bone. This was Iron Fox. "Red Hawk," Iron Fox barked, his voice rough with disbelief. "What is this? Why did you bring her here?" Red Hawk didn't release May Whitaker's arm. He guided her down from the horse, his grip firm, steadying her as her legs gave way beneath her. "She was left to die by her own people," Red Hawk said. His voice stayed calm, but it carried clearly across the gathering circle. "I couldn't leave her." "That is not our concern," Iron Fox growled, stepping closer. Tension rolled off him in hard waves. "White folk bring death, always death." A low murmur of agreement moved through the Red Mesa people. May felt their judgment settle on her like weight. To them, she wasn't a survivor. She was an omen, the face of those who had stolen land and slaughtered buffalo, the promise of another storm. The crowd parted as an older woman stepped forward. Her hair flowed gray as riverstone, threaded with bits of turquoise. Her eyes were sharp, bright as a hawk's gaze. This was Gray Willow, the tribe's medicine woman. She looked May over slowly, taking in the torn dress, the split lips, the raw, blood-dark rings where rope had eaten into her wrists. "Trouble," Gray Willow said flatly. The word struck the ground with weight. "She knows something," Red Hawk replied, moving between May and the tribe's judgment. "Something that could save us." Gray Willow scoffed. Still she motioned to two young women. "Take her to my lodge. I'll treat the wounds." Then she fixed Red Hawk with a hard stare. "Hear me. If she brings danger into our home, that blood will be on your hands." "I accept that," Red Hawk said. One look at his face told May he meant every word. He was gambling his leadership, his honor, perhaps his life, on a stranger. Inside Gray Willow's lodge, the air was thick with crushed juniper. The medicine woman worked with brisk, unsentimental hands, washing May's wrists with warm water, muttering under her breath in her own tongue. The words sounded sharp, but her touch was steady, not cruel. "You fought the rope," Gray Willow observed, tracing the deep abrasions. "Good. Fighting means living." "It wasn't courage," May murmured, flinching as the salve touched raw skin. "Just fear." "Sometimes they're the same," Gray Willow replied. She wrapped May's wrists in soft strips of elk hide. "You'll heal, but be careful, girl. Many here hate the sight of you. A wound doesn't mend just because someone says sorry. I'm not asking for forgiveness," May said, her voice a little stronger now. "Only the chance to do what's right." Gray Willow paused, studying her. "We'll see," she said at last. "We'll see if your spirit matches your words." The day slipped by in a haze of pain and exhaustion. As evening settled over the valley in shades of lavender and gray, May felt the need for air that didn't smell of medicine. She eased out of the lodge, moving slowly, every step aching. She found the creek. Water murmured over smooth stones, indifferent to the wars of men. May knelt and splashed cool water onto her face, rinsing away the last of the desert dust. "You should be resting." The voice didn't startle her. It sounded like it rose from the land itself. May looked up to see Red Hawk a few steps away. He'd changed his shirt, though the bulky bandage beneath the buckskin marked the wound he'd taken for her. He didn't loom. He simply stood there, grounded, unmistakable. He sat on a flat stone near the water and watched the current. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Tired," May Whitaker admitted, "but alive." "Not because of me," Red Hawk said, shaking his head once, "because the desert chose not to take you." A gentle quiet settled between them, broken only by crickets and the distant sounds of the village easing into night. It wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence shared by people who had walked through the same darkness and come out breathing. May studied him. Truly studied him. She saw the weariness carved around his eyes, the weight of leadership pressing hard on his shoulders. He was risking everything by sheltering her, and the knowledge twisted guilt deep in her chest. "I heard what Iron Fox said," May whispered, breaking the stillness. "I heard the anger in the village. They think I'll bring blood to your people." Red Hawk met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "They're afraid," he said. "Fear makes men see enemies where there are none." "Maybe they're right," May said, looking down at her bandaged wrists. "I am a danger to your people, Red Hawk. My brother, he won't stop. He's coming." Red Hawk shifted closer, leaning in just enough that the space between them seemed to disappear. His dark eyes locked on hers. "Danger was coming anyway," he said, his voice low, firm with conviction. "Men like your brother, men like Luther Crow, they don't need a reason to take what they want. They only need opportunity." He paused, his expression easing. "You didn't create the danger, May. You're the spark that showed us where to look." The word lingered between them. Spark. He didn't see her as a burden, not as a white woman to be endured, not as someone to be rescued. He saw her as a catalyst. He saw the fire in her, the one that had refused to die beneath the cottonwood. Warmth bloomed under May's ribs, unrelated to the lingering heat of the day. She took in the strength of his jaw, the depth in his eyes, and understood she was looking at a man who measured nobility not by blood, but by choice. "I don't want your people to suffer because of me," she said, barely louder than a breath. Red Hawk rose and stepped closer, close enough that she felt the warmth he carried into the cooling air. "And I don't want you to suffer for who you choose to be," he replied softly. He didn't touch her. No hand reached for hers. No embrace closed the distance. Yet the connection was there. Electric, undeniable. Two souls from opposing worlds meeting on the same truth. In his eyes, May saw the woman she wanted to become. Brave, honest, free. In hers, Red Hawk found something he had nearly stopped hoping for. An ally who understood the cost of honor. "Rest, May," he said, his voice rough but kind. "Tomorrow will be hard. We must prepare." He turned toward the council fire, leaving May by the creek, her heart beating a rhythm she had never known. She was still a stranger in the valley. Yes. But watching him walk away, she knew one thing with absolute clarity. She was no longer alone. The storm arrived without thunder. It came as a wall of dust choking the horizon, thrown up by the hooves of 30 horses and the heavy grind of a war machine. Afternoon light slanted across the red canyon ridges as scouts sprinted back into the valley. They didn't need words. The fear in their eyes said everything. Cole Whitaker wasn't coming with just hired guns. He was bringing a Gatling gun, built to mow down men like wheat. And worse, he wasn't riding alone. Behind Crow's gunmen came the frontier settlers, shopkeepers, ranchers, men May had known since childhood. They hadn't come out of hatred. They had come believing a lie. They had come poisoned by a lie. Each of them believed they were riding in as rescuers, to save a helpless white woman from a savage tribe. In their own minds, they were heroes about to reclaim order inside the valley. The air went brittle. Warriors tore the covers from their bows. Mothers rushed their children toward the deep shadows of the caves carved into the stone. Red Hawk stood at the mouth of the canyon, his face carved from stone as he watched the dust cloud swell closer. He looked like a man ready to die for ground that had already drunk too much blood. "May," Red Hawk said without turning. "Go to the caves. When the shooting starts, this canyon floor will become a slaughterhouse." May looked at him, then at the line of warriors preparing to face a Gatling gun with arrows and worn Winchesters. She looked at the terrified women clutching their children near the lodges. "No," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it stopped Red Hawk cold. "They'll kill you. he warned, his voice cracking with a desperation she hadn't heard before. "They're coming for me." "They're coming for me," May said, smoothing the front of her torn dress. She reached into her satchel and drew out the worn leather ledger. "And they're coming for a lie." She met his eyes. "The only way to stop this isn't with bullets, Red Hawk. It's with the truth." Before he could stop her, before anyone could, May stepped forward. She walked past the line of Red Mesa people warriors who lowered their bows in confusion. She left the safety of the valley and entered the open throat of the canyon, the strip of barren ground between her people and the approaching force. She stood there alone, framed by towering red stone, the wind snapping her hair across her face. The riders emerged around the bend. At the front rode Cole Whitaker, his expression locked in grim resolve. Beside him slouched Luther Crow, already wearing the look of a man who had spent gold not yet taken. Behind them rode the frontier settlers. When they saw May standing there, unbound, unharmed, a ripple of confusion moved through the ranks. Cole yanked his reins, bringing his horse to a hard stop. "May!" he bellowed, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "Get away from them! Run to us!" Luther Crow lifted a hand, signaling the man at the Gatling gun to hold fire. "Easy now," he called smoothly. "Let the lady come to her senses." May didn't run. She didn't flinch. She stepped forward, closing the distance between herself and the brother who had betrayed her. "I'm not a captive, Cole," she shouted. Her voice rang sharp and clear through the canyon. "I'm not under a spell, and I'm not the one who's lost." Cole's face twisted with fury. He turned to the settlers behind him, desperate to keep the story intact. "She's been brainwashed," he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at her. "You see? They've turned her against her own blood!" "No!" May's cry tore straight through the lie. She lifted the ledger high above her head. "The only thing twisted here is the story you've been telling for 10 years. She walked closer, ignoring the rifles leveled at her chest. She looked past Cole, straight into the eyes of the settlers. Men like old McGregor and Tom Ridley, the sheriff's deputy. "You came here to avenge my parents," May called to them. "You came because Cole told you the Red Mesa people murdered Samuel Whitaker and Ellen Whitaker." "That's right," someone shouted from the back. "And we're here to save you." "You can't save me with a lie," May said. She slammed the ledger against her palm. "I found my father's ledger. I found the records." She pointed straight at Cole. "The Red Mesa people didn't kill our parents," she said. "You did." Silence crashed down over the canyon, thick, suffocating. Even the horses seemed to freeze where they stood. "You and Luther Crow," May Whitaker went on, her voice shaking under the weight of what she was exposing. "You hired the men. You staged the scene. You murdered our parents." She didn't look away. "Because Samuel Whitaker and Ellen Whitaker refused to sell this land. You traded our family's honor for a vein of gold." "She's lying," Cole Whitaker shrieked, but his eyes betrayed him, darting, wild, panic flooding in. "Don't listen to her." "It's all here," May said. She opened the ledger, tore out a page, and let the wind rip it from her fingers. The dates, the payments to Luther Crow, the plan to wipe out the Red Mesa people so the mine could move in. She pointed straight at Cole. "Look at him. Look at his face and tell me I'm lying." The frontier settlers did exactly that. They looked at Cole, pale now, sweat streaking his face. Then they looked at Luther Crow, whose smug grin had vanished, replaced by something cold and reptilian. Slowly, one by one, rifles began to lower. The fire drained from their eyes, replaced by horror. They hadn't ridden in to save anyone. They had been marched toward a massacre. For profit. "Cole," Tom Ridley asked quietly, his voice low and steady. "Is this true? Cole opened his mouth. Nothing came out. 10 years of lies collapsed in on him at once. He looked at May, really looked at her, and saw the little sister he used to carry on his shoulders. He saw the truth burning in her eyes. And for the first time, the gold fever broke. Luther Crowe saw it too. He saw the crowd turning. He saw his fortune vanish in real time. And men like Luther Crowe do not lose with dignity. "You stupid, stubborn girl," he muttered. He drew his revolver. Time slowed. May saw sunlight flash along the barrel. She saw the hammer pull back. She froze, staring straight into death. But Cole Whitaker saw it too. It was the first honest act he'd made in a decade. He didn't think. He didn't weigh it. He kicked his stirrups and drove his horse forward, not away from danger, but straight into it. "May!" Crack! The gunshot split the canyon like thunder. May screamed as Cole jerked in the saddle, red blooming across his chest. He pitched forward, slid from the horse, and struck the dirt with a final heavy thud. "Cole!" May ran to him, dropping to her knees in the dust. Luther Crowe tried to pull the hammer back again, but never got the chance. An arrow flew from the canyon mouth, loosed from Red Hawk's bow. It sliced through the air and slammed into Crowe's shoulder, knocking him clean off his horse. The settlers surged forward, surrounding him, tearing the weapon from his hands. Their rage, finally, found the right target. May saw none of it. She saw only her brother. Cole lay in the dirt, breath tearing from him in wet, ragged gasps. His blue eyes stared up at the narrow strip of sky between the canyon walls. When he looked at May, the fury was gone. The entitlement was gone. All that remained was a boy who had lost his way. He tried to speak. Blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth. "I just wanted the ranch." May sobbed, pressing her hands against the wound, trying desperately to hold his life inside him. "I know," she whispered. "I know. I'm sorry." Cole's eyes flickered. Then they fixed on her face, steady, clear, for one last heartbeat. "May." And then he was gone. The wind sighed through the canyon. The Gatling gun sat silent and cold. The war ended, not with a final charge or a field of fallen men, but with the truth. Sharp, merciless, final. It cut through the lies at last. May Whitaker bowed over her brother's body, her sobs the only sound left in the valley. The gold still slept in the rock, untouched, but its price had already been paid in blood. The ledger was closed. The silence after the gunshot weighed heavier than battle ever could. Hollow, listening, as if the land itself were waiting to see what the living would choose next. Cole Whitaker lay dead in the canyon dust, the anger finally gone from his face, leaving only the boy May remembered from long ago. There was no victory in his death, only the ruin of a life consumed by a lie. May wept not for the man he had become, but for the brother he might have been. Slowly, the tension unwound. The frontier settlers, shaken and ashamed, lowered their weapons. Truth had stripped them bare. From their ranks stepped Abigail Moore, the town's quiet leader since the sheriff's death. Her face was lined and weathered, but when she saw May kneeling in the dirt, regret softened her expression. She turned toward Red Hawk. There were no white flags, only a tired nod between two leaders who had seen enough blood. "We won't return," Abigail said, her voice carrying on the wind. "We'll leave this land to those who know it best. You have my word." Red Hawk met her gaze, his hand resting on his bow, but not drawing it. "We accept your peace," he said. For the first time in a generation, the valley exhaled. That evening, beneath a sky rinsed clean by sunset, the council of the Red Mesa people gathered. Torches flickered, throwing long, shifting shadows against the lodge walls. This time the circle felt different. Not like judgment. Like belonging. Redhawk stood before his people, steady, unbroken. "The vision existed long before she arrived," he said. "Her truth only revealed the cracks beneath us. She fought for this valley when her own blood stood against it." Even Iron Fox, who had once opposed her presence, inclined his head. The elders murmured among themselves. At last, the choice was placed in May's hands. "You may return to your ranch," Grey Willow said, "or you may remain. The decision is yours." May looked around the fire, at faces that had turned from strangers into protectors in the span of 2 days. She thought of the ranch house, empty rooms, cold corners, memories heavy with loss. Then she looked at Redhawk. "I choose to stay," she whispered. Later that night, he led her along a narrow path overlooking the valley. At its peak stood an ancient juniper, its twisted branches reaching toward the stars like a prayer. Stones lay arranged beneath it in a circle, old as memory, sacred as breath. "This is where we speak to the ancestors," Redhawk said quietly. "A place of promises." The wind moved through the branches, cool and pine-scented. May felt the land settle around her, solid and grounding. Redhawk removed a small woven band from his wrist and placed it gently in her palm. "This is protection," he said, "and choice." Her heart beat steady. Certain. In return, May tore a thin strip of white cloth from the hem of her dress, simple, honest, unadorned, and tied it to a low branch of the juniper. It fluttered softly in the evening breeze. "A promise?" Redhawk asked, stepping closer. "A promise to live in truth," May said, lifting her eyes to his. "With you, if you'll have me." "I chose you the moment I cut your ropes," he replied. His voice was rough with feeling, as if the last of his strength had gone into those words. After that, there was only time, slow and inevitable, settling around them. The land seemed to fall away into quiet and shadow, held in the cradle of an ancient people's blessing. Redhawk took May Whitaker's hand. There was no fear in the gesture. No doubt. Only the calm recognition of 2 hearts that had survived the storm and arrived at the same place. "My house is empty," May said softly, resting her head against his chest. "But my heart is here." She had come searching for the truth of her past, answers buried in blood, lies, and dust. What she found instead was the shape of her future. In the shadow of the canyon, beneath the steady watch of the stars, May Whitaker finally understood what home meant. Not walls, not land deeds, but belonging. The night closed around them, gentle and complete. The valley held their silence, and the wind carried it onward as if the land itself approved. May Whitaker had lost her family by blood, but gained something stronger. A chosen truth, a chosen life. And there, under the open sky of the Old West, she finally came home. "Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think. If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment. And thank you for riding with us today. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. Our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully, only to support production, while keeping human supervision over editing, emotional tone, and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.